and
morning.
welcome. January 26th, day 4,222,871 of Flatten the Curve.
Have we stopped the spread?
No,
Did we
no, we've
slow
made
the
it worse.
spread?
They've made it worse. Welcome to the Team Reality Podcast, episode 3. I'm Eric Hartman,
I'm Jessica Hockett.
broadcasting to you live from the suburbs of New York City and the suburbs of Chicagoland. Do you guys actually call it Chi-Town? Or is that something that people that aren't from there say?
Well, if people say that it's Chi-Town, not Chi-Town, that's funny. I've never heard somebody say Chi-Town or Chi. I guess if we were doing the Greek alphabet, it'd be Chi, like Chi-Town. No, Chi-Town. Yeah, that's more like people use that in branding, like the Chi-Town shindig and stuff like that. Same with Windy City, which, by
But
the way,
it's a soft C though.
it's soft. And by the way, it's not Windy City because of the wind. The Windy City, that comes from like windbag politicians. I don't know if you know that little bit of trivia,
Really?
but yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it does get windy here, right? But
That's
yeah, that's where that
weird.
comes
I
from.
would have never thought that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a little Twitter thing, every once in a while a fun Twitter thing comes across the transom, and it was somebody asked a question which was what is something about your city that somebody can say that you immediately know that they're not from there and they probably have never been there,
Oh, sure.
right? And so for New York, it's Houston Street. It's spelled like Houston.
Right.
And when I lived down there for all those years, I would have tourists all the time say, where's Houston Street? I'm like, there is none.
And where does that street, I've heard that before. Where does that street name come from?
Oh, I think it's
Is it someone's last name
I think
or?
it is. I'm gonna
Okay.
embarrass myself. I used to know. I think it is a person's last name, and it runs, east to west at the bottom or the middle bottom of the island. It sort of connects the bottom of the East Village to the bottom of the West Village.
Right. Right.
Um,
So that was the tell.
Yeah, it is the tell. So I guess Chi-Town is the tell as well.
Yep. Right.
Yeah. Well, speaking of New York, I don't know if you heard, but we had quite the legal roller coaster this week. And as a matter of fact, it's been a little bit depressing, frankly. Monday, we got this great news that a Supreme Court judge on Long Island had struck down Governor Hochul's, who we call Mommy Dearest, her illegal mask mandate. Now, I know that you and I have talked about this a little bit, but our legislature last year stripped Cuomo of his emergency powers. Not all of them. It didn't go quite as far as I think a lot of us really wanted them to, but I would say probably 80% pulled back. It kept him from being able to sort of perpetuate, this endless state of emergency, which, is obviously driven, so much of the devastation. So Cuomo quits because he's a grab ass, not because he killed all the grandparents, because he's a lech, right? Which,
Yep.
Is
Yep.
demonstrative of our current political climate. Anyway, she sweeps in, and in November, she declares another state of emergency. And that one was to cancel elective surgeries in our hospitals. Where have you heard that before, right? And then a month later, in December, she initiated a mask mandate. And we talked about this a little bit in the previous podcast, but essentially what she did was she routed these things through the DOH. And we saw Newsom and some other blue state governors try this and do it. And it's a little bit of a bank shot legislation, right? They're using public health law as a mechanism to force mandates on the public. And it's a very deep discussion, and I frankly don't understand how it's remotely legal. But it was interesting because her first mandate to cancel elective surgeries was immediately and roundly ignored by the hospitals here. And because I know people that are like getting knee surgery right now, it literally had no teeth. And the hospitals just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, meh, we're not going to we're not going to abide by this, right? The next one, which was, instituted the same way, the mask mandate, um, she essentially admitted at the time that the state had no authority to enforce this. And what she did is she tasked the counties in New York to enforce this. And what we saw were, about half the counties in the state said, hell no, we're not doing this. And the other half of the counties, including, my genius county, said that yes, we are going to enforce this. And this, really brought up, because it's not really a mask mandate, it's a vax pass mandate. And what it said was that businesses were going to be charged with checking the vaccination status of people that come in. And if they couldn't do that or they didn't want to do that, then a blanket mask mandate was in place, right? So I guess you could call it either or, but it was like this, you were damned if you do, damned if you don't. A lot of businesses, of course, don't want to play, vax police. And so they just said, all right, you got to, I don't want to get fined by the health department, which is their mechanism of enforcement. So we're just going to make everybody wear a mask.
But let me ask you a question. So
Yeah.
can with Hochul telling the counties, like, you have to enforce this, she doesn't have a mechanism to make the counties enforce it, correct? Like, she can't fine them in any way, or, right? Like, they don't suffer a penalty if, like, weren't there some upstate New York counties who were like, no, we're not doing this.
Yes.
She can't do anything to them, right?
It's a little bit up in the air because I think that just like with the schools, there is always, the executive branch, executes the stuff. And what we saw with the school mandates was the threat of withholding funds.
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
think that was attached to this as well.
Got
I
it.
don't know how well that went because a lot of these counties just said no. And some of them said no, go screw yourself. Other ones, like the one, Putnam just north of me and Rockland just west of me, essentially said, we can't do this. We don't have the mechanism. We're not going to, weaponize our health department to go. We're just not going to do this, right? It's unenforceable. And I don't really think that any of the counties that declined got punished. I mean, somebody can maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I just haven't heard of any of that happening.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be the mechanism, I think, funding, state support. That's absolutely what they did with the schools. She threatened, to pull the funding. They controlled a lot of the COVID funding. And our executive branch here in New York also controls the superintendents. They can pull their certification, right? So that was the main thing that's keeping a lot of these
Right.
schools in line, right?
Yeah, we have the same bully tactics going on here. I mean, a lot of the threats are vacuous from from the executive branch, but yeah, it's the same thing here.
But nobody wants to find out. Nobody
Sure.
wants to be that guinea pig. And in New York, very early on, I don't know if you remember, but actually, New Jersey Shore and Staten Island. New Jersey Shore is obviously New Jersey, but there was a gym in New Jersey that tried to open right
Oh,
in
right.
the summer.
Ian somebody, right? Is that his
I
Ian
think
McKay?
so. And
Is
then
that the name?
Staten Island, there was a bar that
Right.
tried to open,
Right.
and they were both shut down, and they were both fined out of existence. I think that the Staten Island bar was fined, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just,
Awful.
they wanted to make an example out of them, and they used, the public health mechanism to punish them and enforce compliance. And I think that, a lot of people, even, actually kind of, especially on Team Reality on our side, really kind of underestimate that tactic. It's like,
Mhm.
if you're a business and, for all this, the last 20 months, you've been trying desperately to stay in business, keep your employees employed. And I know this, right, from a,
Mhm.
restaurant standpoint. It's tough, man. You look at these two businesses that were literally put out of business for, daring to challenge this or daring to open. And it's like, do you want to do that?
Right. Well, and
Do
the
you
other
want,
aspect of that too is that bar on Staten Island. So, I mean, you might have individual small business owners who are willing to stand up, but then if you have the larger restaurant companies, right, like Danny Meyer's group,
right.
are they Union Restaurant Group? Forgive me, I can't remember the
I think
name.
that's right.
But if they're forging ahead with, yes, this is something we have to do because safety, and we care about people, that doesn't help those small business owners either. So like I when it's unfortunate actually that the larger restaurant companies don't come forward and resist some of these
Agreed.
things, because it really would help the small business owners, but it's really hard for a small, the single restaurant owner to be like, nope, I'm not doing this, and then withstand those kinds of fines. It's not tenable for them to do that.
Totally agree. And I think that it's interesting too how, when we saw the airlines go to the Senate and say, how they were essentially asking the Senate to like, help, like we're suffering here. I think you saw even the numbers a couple of days
Mhm.
ago. Flights are way down, and
Mhm.
the CEO of I think American alluded to, the CDC, the travel mask mandate that they have on them as a contributor to that.
Mhm.
And again, I know it's frustrating to see these big businesses, these big lobbies, swing into Washington and sort of throw their weight around. I'm of the camp of like whoever can help, right? Like it was the same with Djokovic in Australia. Yeah, he's a privileged dude or whatever. He's a rich elite guy or whatever. But like, please, that's the way our society works. We look at celebrities, like it or not, these big businesses have a lot of sway. I want
Sure.
the airlines to sort of use their muscle to help us change this. And I think that we saw that with what I was saying about the elective surgeries being canceled here in New York, right? Like the problem is they didn't make a big fuss about it. It was sort of unspoken.
Sure.
They're all just going about business because they had to. They were going to go under. They're like,
Sure.
we have to turn these elective surgeries back on. We're not gonna do this.
Well, bit of a tangent, but I'm not even sure, like, what is elective surgery? Does that, I mean, aren't elective surgeries still important to people?
Absolutely.
Like, aren't
It could
they,
be it could be
right?
Botox, but it could also be a kidney transplant, right? It can
Sure.
be, there's a lot of people out there with like they can't walk because they need a hip replacement. That's considered, elective surgery.
Right. And then if you
Um,
don't have it, then the problem can get worse. So I don't see, when I think when they say elective surgeries, people think that those are right, like Botox or
yeah,
implants
frivolous.
or yeah,
They're
frivolous things
not
that people
always.
want to do, but they're absolutely not. So somebody filed a lawsuit though against Hochul. I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that this was in the works. I don't know that people, I don't, at least on Twitter, people weren't necessarily following it, and then all of a
It's funny.
sudden this decision was made. What, on Monday,
That's exactly right.
right?
Monday late afternoon, which caused quite a scramble. But there's so many lawsuits going on right now, which is honestly great. Like I'm not a big fan of frivolous lawsuits, but I mean, most of these are not frivolous. And there's just a ton, right? This one came out of Nassau County.
Mhm.
I know you don't maybe follow New York state politics as closely as we do, but um, a
Long
couple
Island
weeks,
though, right?
Long Island,
Yeah,
yeah, there
right.
was in Nassau County. They just elected a new county executive, and there was a little bit of a kerfuffle there because he was elected essentially on COVID policy. He's a conservative guy, came in and immediately signed a county executive order outlawing mask mandates, and because the health order is in effect, still, we'll get to that in a second.
Mhm.
The health department there actually came out publicly and said, you know, we disagree with we don't think he has legal standing to make this decision. We're still going to enforce it. Right. Which
Mhm.
causes massive confusion for a restaurant, school, all these people. But anyway, his name is Blakeman. Um, and he, again, was a conservative guy. And this lawsuit was in that area, and the judge is in that area, right? And so Monday at about 5 came out, big splash, right? And I'll share my slides here. Um, wait, hold on. Well, I started at the end, which is, the
Spoiler
bad news
alert.
is that the appellate court granted the stay, right? Our attorney general here is Letitia James. She's currently, honestly, when she's not doing this to our children, she's suing Donald Trump for everything,
Oh, for
who
heaven's
knows.
sakes.
But essentially what happened is this came out on Monday night, and this is the first thing we saw, which was from Bruce Blakeman. He posted this on Facebook, and you know this, right? This is how the information sort of spills out these days. This came out on his Facebook, and it literally took us probably 20 minutes of everybody sort of madly searching for, you know, a legit, not that he would lie, right? He's the county executive, but this is a Facebook post. There's no article linked. There's no, there's no official announcement link. So we didn't really know what to make of this.
Yeah, I must have had
And
like 50 people message me or text me and be like, "What is this? What's going on?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know anything
same,
about this case,"
it
right?
was
So yeah, there
crazy.
was
And
a
it was at the
scramble.
end of the day, right? It was at the end of the
Right,
day. Everybody's
right.
kids were just home. And so we were like, this is obviously great news. And if you, and again, back to our discussion about public health law, like it's obviously unconstitutional what they're doing. I mean, they are making law out of whole cloth through an executive branch, right? And that's really
Right.
what the suit was about. And so he announced this with a little bit of digging. We actually very quickly managed to dig up the actual lawsuit. And this is some of the stuff that was in here, which is really, really good stuff from this judge, right? And it gets it. I'm not going to read all this, but it really gets into the judge on Long Island, this Supreme Court judge. And it's important to note that actually, even though it's Supreme Court judge, this is the third level down. It goes to appellate and then state appeals court, right? So even though it says Supreme Court, he's not like the highest judge in the land. But essentially, his ruling saying that this was unconstitutional is exactly what we were just talking about. He was saying, the legislature has had 20 months to write, vote on, pass, and the governor could sign this kind of legislation. Why haven't you done it? Right? That's the way it's supposed to work. And he goes into and then the next couple blurbs about how this is interesting because we all learn about this stuff as we go along, right? And he was talking about how in order for the public health mechanism to do something even remotely like this, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. In order to do something remotely like this, the legislature needs to pass something that is considered a host law, right? So the regulations that come through the Department of Health need to be easily tied back to an actual law, right? That has been constitutionally written, passed, and signed. So that was essentially it. We all did, jumping jacks. And immediately this happened, right? We had school districts issue statements that were very, obviously they all have legal counsel, but we had Long Island and even districts in our county, which is Westchester, which is very, very, very blue, say that, what, this is unconstitutional as of now, right? And because we all know that these things are appealed almost immediately, right?
Sure.
And so they were saying, look, masks will be optional. That was yesterday. Just as quickly, we had this rumor going around, and it was actually perpetuated by the New York State Department of Ed. And you can see on the right here, Kara Eisenpress actually alluded to it. This is what all these tweets here are responding to, which is they released a statement indicating that there was an automatic stay on this, which turns out was completely untrue. And our school district and the other school districts that decided to not allow optional mask wearing yesterday, which again, turns out it's the only day, right? Because it's now been stayed officially. But for the state to put out a statement saying that there was an auto stay on this was kind of unconscionable. There was talk about contempt because in the judge's ruling, he was like, you can't miscommunicate what's going on here. And the state actually did. And again, they don't ever seem to get in trouble for this, but the state came out and said that there's an auto stay. And so of course, Team Reality, including Elise Stefanik, who is, an upstate House of Representatives member, was like, that's not how this works, right?
Are there automatic
Yes.
triggers for automatic stays? I'm not a lawyer, but does that happen?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay.
And of course, it's just like,
So it's not completely made up.
it's not completely made up, but it's just like of course, like Monday evening and Tuesday, we were all getting this sort of, legal 101, right? And it was like these statutes and stuff in the state, but there are automatic stays because of what kind of lawsuit this was. It was not allowed, and the state obviously should know that. The lawyers for the state should know that. They lied, which is really
Sure,
unconscionable. And that's
right.
why you see like all these all caps, and Phil Kerpen was, off the hook here, but it was so blatant. And it's like, apparently if anybody had any legal knowledge about this, they knew that this was illegal and really, really icky for them to
Mhm.
do.
Mhm.
Right.
I love when Phil Kerpen gets off the hook, by the way. If people don't follow him, they should.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when he gets mad, he gets on it, and things usually change in some way. So, thank you, Phil.
But it just goes to show how, sort of potent a rumor like this, especially coming from an official source, right? It's so dangerous for them to do this. And I think that, we knew that even though that there was no automatic stay, that the state had already appealed it, right? And we knew that the courts would grant a hearing on a stay really quickly, and they did. And it
Mhm,
was at 2
mhm.
p.m. yesterday. And
Did you
this was
watch
our.
any of it, by the way?
I
Any of the
did, I
hearing?
did. I didn't
It
catch.
kept
I didn't get
going
any.
out for me. The it was buffering, probably because so many people
It
were
was your fault.
logging on to it. I
Yeah.
know, and the judge, for people who weren't able to watch it, and I have nothing wrong with, there's nothing wrong with an elderly judge, but the first thing I noticed right away, I'm like, "Oh, this is an older guy
Mhm.
here," and, he kinda made his perspective, I think, on COVID and the emergency pretty well, known from the get-go, didn't he?
He
I mean,
did.
you listened to the whole thing, so
He did. Well, I'll get to that super quick, because this is what, real quick, this is what our attorney general tweeted. And it was funny because this is what she said: "We're appealing last night's decision that struck down the mask mandate in New York. We will continue to do everything in our power to protect New Yorkers from COVID-19." So again, you've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this for a long time. And what this does not say is that there is an automatic stay, right? And if there
Mhm.
had been, she would have tweeted it.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? So,
Well, I'm rolling my eyes at the "we'll continue to do everything in our power to protect New Yorkers from COVID," and that includes forcing kids to cover their faces with useless cloth. I mean,
yeah,
come on, like, give me and this stuff isn't within your power, actually. Actually, you don't have the authority to do these things. That's what this is about.
that's right. Here's just a couple emails from schools that allowed um, mask optional yesterday. And again, it
Mhm.
was like they talked to their lawyers, and you could sort of see it happening. Like their lawyers were like, eh. Even some districts like Mount Pleasant from up here, who they're masky, right? Like they didn't want to
Sure.
do this, but you can tell that their lawyers were like, well, this is there's no automatic stay, no matter what the New York State Department of Ed tells you. So, we advise you to just, back off, right? Because if you don't, you're setting yourself up for liability, which
Sure.
unfortunately, I think our district actually did.
Do you
Um,
know, I mean, around here or in Illinois, there are like a few bigger firms that multiple districts use. Is
mhm,
that the case
yes.
with you guys? So I imagine that's why you saw so
And you,
much, uniform
yes,
messaging between districts. It's because they have the same law firms, or the law
yep,
firms talk to one another, et cetera.
that's absolutely true. And then at 12:30, this guy was great. I had actually followed him, but he's the Albany bureau chief for Newsday, which is a paper out here. But he was
Mhm.
the one that the information was coming. He had the first on everything on this. But he announced that there was a hearing for 2 p.m. A little bit after this, he actually tweeted the link, which we all jumped on and broke. Um, but I actually was on the stream long enough to kind of live tweet a little bit, and I'll just do this here. I was like, hey, hearing. And it was interesting because what the judge did, he got on and he said, how much time do we need? It's really fascinating watching sort of the inside baseball with this stuff, right?
Mhm.
And the lawyers were like, we need 10 minutes. It was very casual, right? And they were both at their desks. They were doing it by Zoom, which is good, I think. um, but the judge, at first, was questioning the state, and he actually seemed fairly sympathetic to the children, right? He asked about how the sanitary code, which normally, right, this is what they're using, right? When you go into a restaurant and there's a sign in the bathroom that says employees must
Let's
wash
wash their
hands,
hands. Yep.
that's what they're using
Yep.
here to
Yep.
put masks on our kids. And so the judge was asking about that. And again, this felt like, positive momentum. But then here you can see, he started talking like Sotomayor, on COVID, which
Mhm.
was it.
Right.
And this is what's very frustrating. I've talked to a lot of our lawyer friends about this, and um, the fact that the state and the judicial system have been informed on COVID by CNN is a problem, right? And the lawyer here for Massapequa and the lawyer that we heard in the SCOTUS hearing a couple weeks ago, unfortunately do this thing where they only stick to what they're arguing, right? They on purpose do not argue the science. They do not argue
Mhm.
the misinformation on COVID. They don't correct the record. They don't disabuse the judges of misconceptions, right? We saw that with
Right.
Sotomayor, right? The attorney could have easily
100,000 children are in the hospital right now with
exactly.
COVID. She was so panicked
It was so
and so
panicked.
wrong.
Well,
So wrong.
it's interesting because the legal eagles are split on this, right? There's
Mm.
almost two POVs. There's one that's like, look, you're going to get dinged if you go outside of your lane. Argue what you're trying to argue. Fight on this narrow thing that if you win, it's going to blow the whole thing, right? Like it's this wedge thing. It's a
Mhm.
very strategic point of view. And then there's the other um, POV on this where it's like, yeah, you really kind of should take any opportunity to argue the larger issue if you can, while still doing that strategic pinpoint thing that you're trying to do,
Sure.
right? It seems to me that the downside is you'll piss off the judge, right? But as a layperson, what I don't understand is the state's doing that, right? And I think that, I didn't hear much of what the state said after this because, look, you can see stream froze again. But she was claiming things like substantial risk to public health if masks aren't worn by everybody. And um, there's no pushback on that.
Right.
And
It's
it's
so
very frustrating,
frustrating.
right? Because they're arguing the science. Why can't we also argue the science? Because it's
Sure.
it's almost like 2 against 1 because the judge also tends to agree with this CNN, style of sciencing. So that was kind of it. When the stream cut out for me, I was kind of positive, and then I heard, Phil Kerpen was like, "Oh no," um, you know. Sorry, this is Phil
Oh, no, that's Phil
Holloway.
Holloway, yeah.
Yeah, and then fast forward to the end of the day, 4:36 p.m. The judge granted the stay.
Yeah.
And so what that means is that kids throughout New York, about half of New York, were able to go mask free
For
all
a
day
day.
yesterday. Our kids were able to do it for a fleeting moment. They did their masks off at noon because I had a doctor's appointment in the morning. I wanted to be available in case that they were kicked out of school. I felt like a parent should be available to pick them up. So we waited till 12, so they didn't get the full day.
So
But,
what happened today? So today they have to mask again? Now, do you
oh
send
yeah,
your kids to school with a mask? Like, do you have a mask basket at home? Like, how does that work for you guys?
for us,
Yeah.
oh, we send our kids to school with their masks because
Got
we
it.
don't
Okay.
because they do have the surgical masks there.
Right.
But we have a preferred brand of mask, and we send our kids with a couple of them just to sort of
Okay.
change off. It
Gotcha.
sucks.
Okay, yeah. I mean, my son, I think I've mentioned, doesn't mask. But his private school
It's
honored our
great.
religious objection. Yeah, it's fantastic. But our daughter, we filed the same objection. The public district didn't grant it. I filed a grievance against them now, etc. That's ongoing. But we do not send her to school with a mask because our reasoning is we have an objection, so we're not going to equip her with a mask. And so we say they force her to mask under threat of going to the principal's office or coming home every day. But we tell her every day, we're like, hey, if you don't want to, you don't want to mask today, you can just tell them no. But of course, she wants to be at school, right? She
Right.
wants to be with her friends, but I mean, she is under duress, and every 2 weeks she'll be like, I'm not wearing a mask anymore. She'll like freak out about it, or be like, oh my gosh, we have no school tomorrow, vacation day, or before winter break, she said, oh good, I don't have to wear a mask for a couple weeks. But what's funny is my son actually, so he's 14, she's 10. I think it was December before he realized that she was wearing a mask at school every day. She was yelling at him in the car, like, shut up, you're not the one that has to wear a mask at school every day. He's like, you wear a mask at school?
Oh,
She was so mad. Like, he was clueless. He didn't know that she wasn't wearing one. I think because he knows we fight for it. And so he's like, yeah, mom fought for it and got it for her too, but just like completely out of touch on that. But she has been a trooper, but she shouldn't have to, do this at all, right? She shouldn't have to
Yeah.
wear a mask to go to school. It's insane. So, but I have not spent a cent on masks, for her to school. So for me, that's sort of a victory, sort of, but it all stinks. It's all so unfair. So where is this case now? So when is the appeal going to be heard? So there's a
There,
stay,
yeah, there's a
and
stay. It was a
then
temporary stay, and they expedited the hearing, the appeal. You know what? I don't know if it's the appeal. I think it might be a proper hearing for a stay. And I need to check on this, but it's Friday.
gotcha. Okay.
It was only 3 days. And
Okay.
again, I think I'm right on that. I don't think
Okay.
it's the actual appeal. I think it's because again, this was a super quick, 10 minutes
Sure.
aside
Right.
stay, emergency meeting yesterday.
Right.
I think Friday's the proper argument for the stay.
Okay.
And unfortunately, people that know the state pretty well, a lot of these judges are Democrat appointees. Hate to say it, and
Yeah,
not that that
same
matters
here.
that much. It feels like the whole judiciary is scared out of their wits. But
So we'll
it,
see.
we'll see.
Yeah.
And it's really sad because my 10-year-old, when he came home on Monday night, we were very happy, right? That this was,
Mhm.
again, we knew that it probably wasn't going to go on for long, but it was a small victory. It was a little,
Sure.
it was a ray of hope. And the way he lit up when we told him the news that this thing had been, he almost got like teary eyed. And it's funny because we know that he doesn't like masks. He's a good trooper. We talked to him about it. We're very open about all this, but his reaction when he heard that there actually may be some concrete relief was really heartbreaking. And my smallest kid made this today. Actually, he forgot to take it, but we give them these little water bottles that they can
Write messages
write
on.
messages on, right?
Right.
And he made this little unmask me, not without
That's
even
awesome.
prompting, but like he
Wow.
wanted to have this be his little protest today, which is great,
Yeah, it's
but
funny
also horrible.
because we hear this maybe, every month, every couple months, the universal maskalists on social media will say, it's my kid doesn't mind a mask, masks are no big deal, et cetera, et cetera. To which, I always say, well, if your kid doesn't mind being forced to cover their face at this point, like that's the sign of a problem. Actually, like that's not a good sign.
Yeah, that's what
And
child abusers say. Like, oh, they
right,
don't
right.
mind.
Exactly. And I think that there was a school outside of Boston, or a district outside of Boston. And I don't exactly agree with this approach. The name escapes me right now, but they were letting Massachusetts has a different kind of state level mask mandate going on, where I think the school board can, or their equivalent of school boards in Massachusetts, can decide if they're going to have a mask mandate or not if a certain percentage of kids are vaccinated. I think that's
Yes,
the situation. And so there was a
totally.
school outside of Boston where they had a really high vaccination rate. The school
Not
board,
that that prevents spread or
no, right,
getting sick or anything.
America's colleges, but they voted a couple months ago to try this out, right? And just let the vaccinated kids, which was the majority, almost all the kids, but choose. And one of the Boston newspapers has done a couple articles on this. And it's interesting because the kids that they've interviewed, some of them have said things like, wow, like I didn't realize like that not seeing people's faces was affecting me. Now, that's not a direct quote, but that's what the kinds of things that the kids
Interesting.
were saying. It's like and some of the kids maybe would have said that they were okay. Yeah, okay, we need to wear a mask until everyone's vaccinated or whatever. But it's like they were experiencing relief and had not realized
Even the
how
ones
much it had affected them, and they're
that didn't
learning.
think that they would.
Right, right.
Nice.
And so I think that's fascinating. So when people from a psychological, my PhD is in educational psychology, right? So I'm angered by a lot of this, but I'm fascinated at the same time too from a psychological perspective. So when yeah, when we say, well, kids don't mind, well, what do you mean? Like, right? And do they, you can be
Yeah.
experiencing harms and not even realize it, right? Like who would deny that part? I hope no one. So yeah, but that is heartbreaking about your kids to experience that relief and that joy, just to be smacked down by your governor again. It's
Well,
wrong. It's
and I
wrong.
don't know if you remember, but last week, and I think it was from the clip that you were talking about, where she was talking about the shoes, right? Where when she was a mom, her daughter didn't want to wear sneakers to
For
school,
heaven's
and she got
sakes.
used to the sneakers. So blah blah blah. That same speech, she actually teased the idea of lifting the mandate in 5 days on February 1st. So that also added to this whole court thing in the last couple of days, which was like, why are you fighting this? Like, you were, indicating that you were going to, lift this thing on Feb 1 anyway. Like, what's the deal? Um, uh,
Yeah.
and so now people are like, well, wait a second. I guess you weren't going to lift it on Feb 1, you liar. I
Yeah,
mean,
I don't
people are just reprehensible.
have you seen Tangled? Disney's Tangled. Do you know
Long
that
time ago.
movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's the villain in that. Her name is Mother, and Mother Gothel, and she sings this song, "Mother Knows Best. Listen to your mumsy," and she's like, saying how she keeps Rapunzel in this tower, right, and like pretends that she's her mom, and she's really evil. But that's what I think of when I think of, like, the governor of Michigan, and then now the governor of New York. Like, they have that same, like, governor knows best. Listen to your governor, and but they're really imprisoning and abusing people with their power. Like, it has to stop. It has to
People,
stop.
too many people like it, though.
I
They
know.
want to be
Controlled.
mothered by
Yeah.
the government.
Yeah. But we are seeing, here, so on the Illinois side of things, we are seeing pushback. It's been frustrating, I have to say, especially in Chicagoland, because we do have, we have parents pushing against all of this, pushing against masking, but then we have parents that love it. Right. And I mean, like, one
Yeah.
block over, my neighbor had this sign up that says, it was mask. It was an acronym, like, mask all kids safely, or I can't remember what the acronym stood for, but, and then I had my unmask the kids sign, a block later. So we really do have this division. A couple weeks ago, we had a student in one town over, Naperville. That's a southwest suburb of Chicago. I think the fourth largest city in Illinois, over 150,000 people. Large couple school districts there. One of them, Naperville 203, is having their monthly board meeting, and a student gave a speech during public comment that got a lot of traction. So I want to play. Let me
Yeah, I saw this. It's very
do
powerful.
this. Yeah, I want to. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. And her approach. I've attended board meetings. I've seen a lot of the different speeches that have gone around on social media. I've seen kids use a lot of different techniques, a lot of different tactics, pleading, saying that these are the effects of the mask on me. I've just seen every technique. But Addison George is her name. She took a different kind of approach. Let's take a look. Let me know if you can hear this. Hopefully you will.
I think you have to share the tab to get the audio, by the way, instead of the share the screen.
It's not working. Hold
Yeah, I
on.
think if you go to stop screen share.
Okay.
And then
Apologies. Still trying to work out the tech aspects on our end. So do share tab.
Yeah, you can stop that screen.
I'm the worst. I'm so sorry. Share tab.
Yeah, go back to StreamYard.
All right.
And then stop screen.
Oh, gotta stop it first.
There you go.
Okay, share.
And then Chrome tab. And then it'll let you choose the window.
Got it. Yep, you are right. Although,
make sure share audio is checked. I think
It
it's
is,
automatically
yeah.
checked.
This
Yeah.
this one is not. Now it like forwarded to another video though.
But it'll take you to that page and then you can back up.
Okay.
No, thank you, Beijing.
No, thank you.
There you go.
Right. No.
Thank you for forcing me to wear
Okay,
a mask.
let me do it back a little bit there.
I'm going to mute.
Brazen about it. It's just the public school.
All right. Should I do full screen? I'll just do it like this.
You can. It works.
George, and I'm here to say thank you. Thank you, School Board and Superintendent Bridges, for not using your power to push back on the state of Illinois about the mask mandate. We get to wear masks all day, every day now. Isn't that great? Thank you for forcing me to wear a mask so I no longer have to brush my teeth or wash my face. Seriously, my life is so much easier. I don't wear glasses, but if I did, I would thank you for concealing my eyes with the fog from my breath, too. Thank you for teaching students that our own mental health is much less important than making triple vaccinated adults feel safe. Thank you for teaching me that even the most minute risk is not worth taking. Life is best when you take the path of least resistance, with no chance of failure and definitely no chance of catching a cold. Thank you for not reaching out to the students to ask how we feel about masks, because if you did, the majority of students would say that they hate masks, and then you might second guess your decision to make us wear them. Thank you for allowing me to experience the anxiety associated with never seeing facial expressions. Thank you for teaching us that we should never question authority or think critically, but instead we should follow whatever the people in charge tell us to do. Obedience is best. I realize now that thinking for yourself is overrated and not really necessary when you can just make decisions based on fear. Thank you for pushing your irrational fears and anxieties on me because I didn't already have enough to worry about. I realize now how easy I had it when I only had to worry about my classes, my grades, SAT, and getting into college. Thank you for teaching me that being a morally superior person only requires that I cover my face for 8 hours a day, and that the most morally superior people wear 2 masks or even 3 masks. As you know, states around us, Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, and Minnesota, which have 2.5 times more students than Illinois, don't force kids to wear masks. I'm with you though. These states are out of control, recklessly putting kids at risk of misery and death every day. Masks work, even if these states have the same outcomes as Illinois. Speaking of data, thank you for staying silent about masking despite the fact that COVID has a very high survival rate in kids my age. Who needs data anyway, though? We all know that it will never be safe to see anyone's face ever again. Thank you for not challenging this irrational fear and ineffective COVID policy of masking. After all, the $42 billion spent in research by the NEH, not $1 went towards studying the mental health aspect of kids. I ask you, don't give in. Stay strong, stay courageous, stay quiet, and let's keep masks on kids forever. Thank you.
On behalf of the board, thank you for your comments. We always like to hear from students.
So that was fantastic. She's a rock star. That took a lot of guts. And I think one thing I really appreciate about her approach is that, teenagers are sarcastic, right? Like we expect teenagers to be sarcastic. And so she used that sarcasm to sound exactly like a teenager sounds, right? When they're, pushing back against a lot of things to really, turn the arguments that the district has used against them and say thank you for doing all these terrible things to us. Keep doing it, please. My only regret is that we do because everybody's forced to wear masks to be in that meeting and to speak at that microphone, which is asinine. We can't see their faces, right? Like they get to hide. We can't see what the adults in the audience there are doing and how they're reacting. But more importantly, the superintendent, Dan Bridges, and the board members, they get to hide behind their masks, right? As she's talking to
Yeah.
them. And I mean, it's public comment. So the board, the rule around here at least is that, they don't respond to people during public
Same.
comment. And I think, yeah, that's fine. That's part of protocol. But you say a lot with your face, right? And when it's hidden, you don't have to show any reaction at all. But Addison has gotten a lot of attention from local and national media, and that's the kind of thing we need. I mean, we really need hundreds of kids showing up at board
We
meetings
do.
and saying stuff like that. But I'm encouraged to see students speaking out like that, because it's been too long. It's been too long. And I remarked the other day to someone, kids, we've got millions of kids in the United States who are forced to mask to go to school. And, they're not paid. They're not paid. The teachers are paid. They're paid to mask. They're paid to enforce masks. I mean, even people who, somebody who works at Dunkin' Donuts or somebody who's working at a hospital, so the mask is, forced as part of your uniform effectively, or, part of the dress code, but you're being paid, right? America's kids who are being forced to mask, they're not being paid. So that's a huge distinction, I think, between the kids and the adults in a school system. So any other thoughts or reactions to Addison's speech?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of mockery, and it's definitely right, like the teenage sarcasm you pointed out,
Sure.
but just ridicule, I think in general is of these elitists that are doing this to us and our children has been underutilized. So I appreciate the tone; it was well written, but I think your larger point is important too, which is the fact that we need more kids themselves to speak up, because part of the narrative from Team Apocalypse, Team Lockdown, is that children don't mind it, right? And to your point before, it's like that's not a real argument, but they use it. They're like, oh, what are you, some sort of wimp? It's just a mask. It's just a little thing. Why don't you do your part? Put on this mask for it becomes this thing where it doesn't matter if it works or not. It is just this little thing that you see kids can handle, but you adults are too wimpy to deal with. And it's like, well, what? Like that makes no sense. Like never before in history have we done this. We did this to like slaves and things to, to cover up their humanity and not allow them to, to speak. But, the fact that we're doing this to millions and millions of children is an abomination. And it's not surprising that they're used to it, because if anybody has had kids, they know that kids in general want to please. They want to do what their parents say, even though, yeah, some of them are insolent and, when they become teenagers, they rebel in some ways, right? But, this messaging of you're a vector, you're going to kill grandma, you need to step up and have a purpose, you need to carry your weight. It's not crazy. It's totally understandable that so many kids have embraced this. And obviously there's the social peer pressure of it, right? Where kids run around with, we went to a little protest rally where we held signs yesterday. And ironically, we got the news that the stay was granted at the protest, but it was a bunch of parents, a bunch of kids holding up signs on the side of a busy road. And we actually had some high school kids that had gotten out and were walking through the parking lot, and they were wearing masks. And one of the moms and their kids were like, hey, take off your mask. And the girls were like, hee, hee, hee. They were, you could tell they were conflicted because they were outside and they had masks on. And it's like, even if you buy into the propaganda, the fact that they were outside and still sort of by default wearing these masks and totally okay with it is a problem. It's a real problem. And it just, it says more about the psychology of children than the efficacy of masks.
Right. Well, and the other thing too, I was talking to a friend about this yesterday, insofar as, will kids kind of tolerate or put up with the mask? And I guess at this point, I mean, we homeschooled, that first the last year. We
Good for you guys.
we homeschooled, we pulled the kids out. Yeah. But this year, my daughter wants to be in school, and these kids want to be in school, and
Yeah.
they're a lot of them are. It's almost like they're triggered, or they have like post traumatic stress disorder from the idea of school being shut down again, right?
Yes.
So if the choice is, or the forced dilemma that they've been put into is, you forced and false dilemma is that you wear a mask but you're in school, right? Because you don't want to be
Right.
out of
Of
school
course.
for
We all made
any
it.
reason.
But we made that bargain, right?
Sure, right, right.
When our schools were closed last year, um, we did homeschool in the spring of 2020. Our camps were open in the summer of 2020. It was totally normal in our camps. And then they came back and we found out that they weren't going into school. We didn't even have, it was all virtual school first. And it was horrible. We should have homeschooled. But you're absolutely right, because once we had the fall of totally virtual school, and it was such a nightmare, and it was so depressing, and everybody hated it, and the kids, and so like we work, right, and so we had to, send our kids to a place where the kids were all together on Chromebooks, masked up, doing school. I mean, it made zero sense. It wasn't safe. Even though there was no like outbreak, it made no medical sense. It made no logical sense. But by the time we forced them to open up the schools and get the kids physically back in, we were all willing to have the masks on. We were just like, okay, uncle, fine,
Right,
put them in
right.
beekeeper suits. We want them to be in person because it was so detrimental. It was so negative to their mental health, and they weren't learning.
Yeah.
And we knew immediately as soon as we got them back in that we had to fight the mask. And it was very interesting too, from a community standpoint, because a lot of the parents, and this was kind of disheartening, but once we got them in, we shifted right to get the masks off, right? But there was like a subset of the parents that were on board for opening the schools that were like, no, we got them back in school, but we want them to be safe.
Right.
Right. And that was
Right.
very concerning. And I think that most of those parents have I think all of them have come, back over, but that wasn't helpful either.
No, but I get it. If you're a parent, one of you, both of you works. A lot of people at that point, who were white collar professionals, were working from home. Like, to be honest, like, you need your kids out of the house, right? Right, because the kids are around. We're trying to work.
Yes.
Like that's not great, right?
And
That doesn't work. So I understand to a certain extent. I can empathize with that. Like, hey, whatever it takes right now, because I need them to be at school. Not just selfishly, but because I need to work, but because the kids need to be back with other kids, right? And they
There's
need
a
to be
lot of
taught face to
factors.
face.
Well,
So,
but the we have to work factor is something that they used against us, and they still do, right? Which is this, school is not childcare.
right.
And it's like,
Right.
well, it kind of is, like, we're forced to pay taxes, right? That are pay for these schools. You don't get a stipend back. You don't get your money back. You don't get vouchers. You don't get to choose. You don't have a choice. And the way our society is built currently, it didn't used to be this way, but there are a lot of two-parent working households.
Sure.
And because of that, the public school system, and obviously if you do private, same thing, but that is de facto childcare, right? Like, you put your kid on the bus in the morning, you both go to work,
Right.
and you both come home, and your kid comes home, and voila, right? He went
Right.
to school, you went to work. I mean, that's
Well, it's one of the things that our economic system is structured around, right?
Yes.
So that and yes, people choose to homeschool. Yeah, yes, it's not the majority, obviously. So we have this in place. Our economic system is structured around it, and then you take out that part of the system, and then you expect that not to affect every other part of the the system, or you expect remote learning, which I had somebody say to me the other day. They call it remote learning because the chances of learning are remote. Which, yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. But
That's
and
funny.
not only did they take away part of the economic system when they shut schools down, they take away the communal aspect of school, the
So much.
community function that public and private schools serve, right? Like, I have not, with my daughter's public school, I have actually not been inside the building. I have not been inside. Actually, I have dropped off her instrument there when she's forgotten it at home. I don't wear a mask when I walk in. I just walk straight into the office, and then I dropped off she plays the bass, and it's huge. So I dropped that off. But parent teacher conferences, we did not go into the building because we would not wear a mask, and so we were respectful. We were kind. We met outside on a 30-degree morning with the
They don't even
teacher at a
offer in
picnic
person
table.
with
Oh,
us. With
really?
masks.
Oh,
It's still all
give me a
virtual.
break.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. And it was a lovely conference, actually. And we told the teacher, like, we don't want to meet with you mask to mask. We're talking about our daughter. We're talking about her learning, and she was more than amenable. We even offered to meet her at a restaurant across the street and buy her breakfast or whatever. She turned that down, which is fine. I understand. But yeah, we haven't been a part of that community, which is awful, and it's sad, and that's bad for the kids too, right?
It is, and it's really depressing how the opponents, right, the people that want schools shut down, it's mostly the unions, right, but they want these draconian measures, this super twisted idea of what equals safe these days. They dismiss all of these things, right, or they diminish them,
right,
and they impugn them. Right. They're like, oh, this, and not to mention, extracurricular activities, at least here, are still severely muted. Right. And they have this, you got to be, if you're above a certain age, you can't participate in extracurricular activities unless you're vaccinated.
Sure.
Which causes a whole bunch of problems.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I kind of wonder. I wonder the impact on things, maybe not, music or some of these other audience-oriented things, or even with sports. Like, you got to think that it develops that it hinders the development of kids in their sport, right? Or in their chosen activity, to have been cut off for so long, or that their practice of their activity is not the same. I mean, it sort of robs the future of their full potential, right? And their talents to have this done to them. One more thing quick about Addison, back to Addison and the thank yous, with the technique that she used of sarcasm. Even though she was kind of lighthearted with it, I mean, she's hurt, right? I mean, this has hurt her, and her speech, in part, it comes from a place of understandable anger and hurt. 2 people after Addison, we won't play it, but 2 people after her, another student speaks, a female, and she's pro-mask. And one of the things she says, she's actually asking the school board to make sure that masks are more stringently enforced. She says that, that they're wearing them below their nose, etc. I'll quote her here. She says, "In fact, in the majority of my classes, there are at least 3 students in each class who regularly wear their masks incorrectly, which," this is key, "makes it harder for me to focus in class, as it makes me feel unsafe just to be there." And but for that girl, right? But I'm not castigating or shaming that girl. I see her as just as hurt as Addison is. Right? Because she's sitting there in class, and she's terrified, right? And she's like, cover your faces. So they're 2 sides of the same coin, and they're 2 examples of kids that have been really hurt and disillusioned, and in the second girl's case, misguided. And I don't understand how in that case, Naperville 203 school board and the superintendent, Dan Bridges, can sit there in good conscience and tell themselves noble lies, like, we've done the right thing here. We've kept kids safe. We've kept schools open, right? I think that's part of the rationalization. But Yeah, I
They
mean, but they're gonna have to live with this, right? In the end, I mean,
are.
they're gonna have to live with that, and I just have to rest in the knowledge that that the truth about all of this will eventually come out, and yeah, they'll have to live with what they did, and what
Yeah.
they decided. So
Oh man. What a
so yeah,
nightmare.
we're gonna have to we have to bring this to a close
Yeah.
right now, and abrupt ending due to personal appointments. But next time I want to, do the Illinois update
Great.
on the mask
Love to hear
stuff.
it.
We have
There's so many parallels
oh,
between
I
our two
know.
states.
Tell me about it. And we have hopefully a decision on a TRO regarding masks and quarantine coming by the end of the week. So
What is
our
a TRO?
temporary restraining order, sorry, regarding parents in 145 different school districts across the state filed a suit in October, I believe it was, and they are claiming that their children's due process rights under Illinois law and the Illinois Administrative Code have been violated by the forced, especially exposure quarantines and the masking, which under Illinois law and rules, masking is actually a form of quarantine, believe it or not. So that's the tact that the lawyer has taken. So we're hoping for a decision on Friday. That would have big impacts. It's looking pretty good because the judge was in the hearing last week. She was wearing a mask, but it was decidedly under her nose the entire time, and not just by accident. Like she
Good for
was,
her.
it was low hanging, low ride.
We call that the half Gorsuch.
I love that. I love that. So yeah. So hopefully next time we'll have a positive update about that. So
Yeah. Well, all right. Did we solve it?
not yet. Not yet. We're working on it. We're working on it.
Next time.
Next time.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Good to see you. Take care.